everyone, this is Aya Aruzi from Hinawi Software. Our topic for today is extremely useful, extremely beneficial. It's used in any company, in any business. Everyone needs it through the HRMS module. So it's regarding the end of service. First, we are going to go through the file menu and then set up modules and then HRMS settings and then general settings. Notice here at the top that I'm logged in from the admin account because it's really sensitive data, it's really sensitive windows that I'm going to open now, so it should be permitted for the admin only. I'm going to click on general settings, and then right here in this window we have many different companies in case more than one company exists on the same system, and each one of them has its own setup differently. Let's, for example, choose the HRMS for Customers Test company here, and then let's go to the HRMS Activities setup. Now, everything we apply here, everything we do is going to appear later on in the HRMS Activities menu when creating any of these activities, which is in this case the end of service in this video. Okay, let's go to end of service here. And notice here that in this window we have the company name at the top, we have the activity setup name right here, and this is the setup. First, we have to make sure that the effective date is correct, because later on it will read from the date which you have created here, the date which you have inserted and chose right here. Any date which you choose here will appear later on when creating the end of service for employees. So we have to make sure that, for example, if we choose the January 1st 2019, then in this case any other setup we apply there will read from this date and so on and forward with this. So basically the date is very important, crucial in this situation, because it specifies when is this setup going to take action mainly. Then we can select any previous setup and copy any previous setup. This is useful in case, for example, we or any company, for example, had a specific setup last year or 2 years ago, and for any reason they want to get back that setup again. So instead of like creating and doing everything from scratch, they can easily go here and copy the setup again and again, which saves a lot of time actually. We also have the edit feature right here in case we want to add more columns other than the mandatory ones or choose the priority of them. It's all from here. And now we choose the department which we want to apply the setup on. Are we going to choose all departments or specific departments, or like any department we want is selected from here, from the icon right here. We can insert rows, we can delete rows as much as we want. There is no specific fixed number for rows. You can add as much departments as you want and as much positions as you want. Now here we have the end of service reason. We choose whether the end of service applies for termination, resign, or all. And then the maximum benefit, which is in this case 2, we choose here the maximum benefit, which means how much maximum end of service can be paid to employees. And of course in the type we have either maximum benefit as salary or the amount. So this decides the number which is in the previous column, the column before it, which is the maximum benefit. Those two are related. And here we have the salary maximum, which allows us to choose what is the maximum item for salary. Is it basic salary only? Is it all? Is it selected ones? We can add as much as we want from the icon right here. And in the salary end of service also we have items, the same items we have seen here, but we can choose as much as we want. Now from service from and service to decides the number of years which this employee has worked on in the company or the business. For example, as it says here that from 1 year to 5 years, which means that any number in between them, like 2, 3, 4 years, the salary days will be 21 and the rate is absolutely 100. We can change this to 50% to 0%, it depends, but the setup which you see here is selected from the set default below, because we have already set the end of service setup for you and provided you with a recommended setup in case you are, for example, in the United Arab Emirates, because this applies to the United Arab Emirates setup. But in case you are in any other country other than the United Arab Emirates, you can feel free to change the setup which is contained here. Okay, and in the end of service basis, this is set as 0 for all of them. And what does this mean, this column right here, dependable? Dependable, mainly the first row is always set as yes. Why is that? Mainly because there is no row above it, like this is the first row. And in case you try to change this to no, the system will not accept to save it because it's the first row. So it makes sense for it to be selected as yes. So that's why it's selected here as yes. No means that don't read the previous line. Like just apply this and don't read the previous line. Let's see, for example, if we want to see this row, what does this mean? It means that from 3 years service to 5 years. So for example, if an employee has worked 4 years in the company and then resigned, so that employee which suddenly decided to resign, not get terminated, no, resign, will have 14 days of the salary, like the salary days will be 14 days. So mainly he or she, this employee, will receive his or her salary for like the same salary will apply to the employee for 14 days. Okay, so that's how it works here. 14 days for every year. So for every year that this employee has worked on, whether he worked for like 4 years, he will or she will receive 14 days salary for every year. And right here, if we select this as no, what it says here is that for any employee who has been terminated this time, not resigned, for any employee which has been terminated, and this employee has worked for like any number of years between 5 and 99 years, let's say 6 years or 7 years, he or she will receive 30 days of salary for every year. So for every year, let's say he or she worked for 6 years and his or her salary was for example 1000 JD. So 1000 JD, he or she will receive the salary for 30 days salary for each year, okay? And by the way, when we try to change this to no, notice here that the system does not allow us to change this to no, because by default it has to be yes. The first row and the third row by default must be yes, and those two can be changed accordingly to both yes and no. Okay, so mainly that's what it means in the end of service setup. We also have here when resigning, if a service period, for example, is greater than 5 years, are we going to calculate it as terminate, yes or no? And in the second one, don't include unpaid salaries, not created salary sheets, and create an end of service form. Now for this one, we must untick this. It must be unticked, unselected, in order for us not to face any consequences, problems, issues, error messages. Nothing of that is going to be shown and displayed at the time of creating end of service. Everything will go smoothly because we do not want to include not created salary sheets. We do not want to include them. So basically, yeah, we have to untick this and then save and close. In this window, we are going to see the main difference among active status of employees and inactive status of employees regarding end of service. How does this affect the manage employees menu, and how does it affect all other HRMS activities menu? And what does this affect the salary sheet activity as well? Notice here that we have two dates at the top. We have the date of creating end of service, and when does this end of service starts taking action? Like, when does the action start of end of service, and when does it get created, only created? First, we have the 15th of January as the create date of the end of service activity, and it's not approved yet. Keep in mind that it's just created. And right here on the right side, we have that the end of service effective date will start in June, 15th of June. So there are several months between creating the end of service for the specific employee and when does it start taking action, the actual effective date of it. We have two cases, whether the employee's status is active or inactive. So first, at the top, when we create end of service, we have two options. Either we get it active or we get the employee to be inactive. Like, the option is related to what the company's policy is about. So the admin user or the HR officer decides whether the employee should be active or inactive at the time of creating the end of service. If we choose for the employee's status to be active, then the manage employee menu will be allowed for normal usage, and any activity regarding the manage employees menu will still be available for the employee, which is still considered as active, like the status is still considered as active. However, on the other hand, if we decide, or like the admin HR officer decides, that the employee status is inactive at the time of creating end of service, in this way the manage employees menu will not be allowed and will not be available. The employee's name will not be displayed and available for any changes or creating or editing in this specific menu. And notice here that at the time of proceeding forwards with end of service effective date, the employee's status will not be allowed to change any HRMS activity, even if the employee's status is active at the time of like creation. Now, when we proceed forwards with the effective date of the end of service, he or she will not be able to use the HRMS activities anymore. So this is not possible, and it doesn't give the option to disable or make it possible, because it's by default not possible to change the HRMS activities when the employee has reached the effective date of the end of service. So there is no decision in that. It's just by default that you cannot use the HRMS activities menu. And here, when the employee's status is inactive at the beginning, when we change that status of employees at the time of creating end of service, and the status is inactive at the time of creation, manage employees will be disabled, and HRMS activities will also be disabled at the time of reaching the effective date of the end of service. And now, how does this affect the salary sheet? Basically, when the employee's status is active and when he or she reaches the effective date of the end of service, which is 15th of June, the employee, will still be able to use till the month of May only. And those 15 days in June will be considered and paid as end of service benefits. So May till May will be considered normally as like salary sheet creation, and all those things will proceed normally until reaching 15 days of June. Those 15 days of June will be paid with end of service benefits instead. And here, when the employee's status is inactive and at the time of reaching the effective date of the end of service, he or she will not be able to use it at all, since he or she is inactive from the beginning. So everything is disabled, managed employees are disabled, HRMS activities are disabled, and therefore salary sheet is also disabled for the employee who is inactive. And that's regarding the differences between active employees and inactive employees at the time of creating end of service and at the time of reaching an end of service effective date. Thank you.